Hoyun is a novelist who writes a light novel, a popular source material for Manhwa, where the story's villain is destined to die one day. Right after finishing the last chapter of his novel, he receives a strange letter that transmigrates him into his own story, just like in a manhwa, into the body of the very villain whose tragic fate he himself wrote. After the transmigration, Hoyun finds himself lying in a bed completely disoriented. He doesn't recognize his surroundings, and even his body feels different. When he gets up and looks in the mirror, he notices some disturbingly familiar features. That ominous crimson hair, that cunning mouth, and those slanted eyes that don't show a single hint of emotion. It's then that it hits him like a lightning bolt. He has possessed someone else's body, and that person is Arsen Adele, the most powerful villain in his manhwa-style novel. The problem is that there are only a few days left until he's assassinated. But before we get into all that, here's the context on this villain. Basically, the Arsen family has mixed blood, part demon, part human. Thanks to the demonic powers in their bloodline, they were once one of the most powerful families in the empire, but they fell from grace because of 6 specific families who united to destroy them. With that context, it's pretty clear why Adele chose to walk the path of a villain. He tried to get revenge on the families that ruined his own, but he failed miserably. This plot twist is precisely why the original Adele summoned the creator of the manhwa world he inhabits. In just a few days, Adele will die like a dog at the hands of knights from those 6 families, and here comes the twist. In terms of talent, Adele is one of the most gifted characters in the entire manhwa. His abilities even surpass the protagonists, but no matter how powerful the villain is, Hoyun wrote the story so that he could never defeat the main character, no matter what. Even worse, Adele currently can't even use his mana. If Hoyun had known that the restrictions he placed on Adele would come back to haunt him personally, he would have never written such a doomed narrative for this manhwa. Everything is completely stacked against the villain. While cursing his bad luck, Hoyun notices a letter identical to the one that brought him to this world. It turns out to be a letter left by the original Adele for Hoyun. Bro hopes it contains some useful clue to start with, but the paper is completely blank, literally, not a single word. Then, letters suddenly start appearing on the page as if by magic. The sentence that appears is a message from the original Adele to his creator. If Hoyun wants to know how to use the powers this body contains, Adele wants him to answer with a simple yes or no. Of course, Hoyun starts cursing again when he realizes he's actually talking directly to Adele, the very one who dragged him into this mess. The paper insists that he answer with a yes or no. Finally, Bro gives in and says yes. Now that Hoyun is on board, Adele explains that he will answer anything his creator writes on that paper. Some questions will be free, but others will come at a price. The more important the question, the higher the cost. Naturally, Hoyun gets straight to the point and asks the big question, how to return to his original world. Adele immediately replies that it's impossible. Well, Hoyun pretty much figured as much, so he was prepared for the bad news. He then asks a more practical question, how to use mana, and how to activate Adele's unique abilities. It turns out that question has no cost. Adele directly imprints the knowledge into Hoyun's mind, a classic manhwa power-up. The instant it happens, Hoyun starts to feel the mana flowing through his body. The first trait of Adele's body is the ability to take away someone's 5 senses, called darkness. The second is the power to immobilize opponents, using an aura called killing intent. When Hoyun activates it, he can feel it working, at least that encourages him a bit. He can now immobilize common people, though not yet trained knights or soldiers. The last major skill he needs to learn is the most broken one of all, Position Transfer 1. As its name suggests, this ability literally allows him to swap places with an object of his choice. Basically, it's the ultimate move for assassinations. The moment he activates it, a kind of strange magic occurs, which is a clear sign that the power actually works, but it's not that impressive yet. For now, he can only swap within a radius of 20 square yards, which is a bit disappointing compared to Adele's powers in the original manhwa story. Still, if he practices every day he'll improve, so he decides to test it by swapping places with a nearby suit of armor. As soon as he activates it, he disappears from his spot and the armor appears in his place. The swap is successful, but the guy doesn't land very well. It seems he just needs more practice. Meanwhile, a group of knights marches directly towards his residence, ready to claim his life in a scene straight out of a revenge manhwa. Those knights finally arrive at their destination, representing the county of Leon with a determined look. Captain Felt learns from Adele's servants that the villain is resting in his room. The servants are worried because Adele hasn't moved in days and is locked up. Without waiting any longer, Felt and his men burst in and confront their target, who is casually enjoying himself, setting the stage for a classic manhwa confrontation. Without listening to a single word, Felt simply orders his men to eliminate him immediately. But they weren't prepared for our Manhwa protagonist's position transfer ability, which allows him to swap places with any object within a set radius. By targeting the sword of the knight who was about to attack him, he activates the skill and lunges forward with the knight's sword in hand. His unexpected attack hits its mark, cutting down his opponent and surprising both Felt and his men. Stepping back after his first kill, the villain simply waits for the next one who dares to mess with him. Felt still seems confident because of the number of men he has and orders a direct attack. The battle begins, but instead of facing them recklessly, Adele breaks a window and jumps out, also using a cool application of his skill. First, he throws the sword to the ground, then he activates position transfer just in time to swap with the sword. This allows him to avoid fall damage and escape safely. The next step is to reach the Arsen family's forest. As he heads into the forest, Felt orders his men to pursue him to confirm his elimination. We switch perspectives to the Arsen forest, where our protagonist is running and panting, his legs doing their best to gain as much distance as they can. The thing is, even if he manages to escape this territory, he knows that the only thing waiting for him later is death. This manhwa doesn't pull its punches. To use the gate in the forest to access the demon realm. The demon realm in this manhwa suffered huge losses from the war against humans, so he hopes they'll accept him in this time of need, even though he himself is human. However, that was his initial plan because Felt and his knights are already there, quickly fanning out to search for him. Luckily, the villain is still hidden, but he's having a hard time finding the gate's exact location. He has a rough idea of where it might be, but when he steps on a dry branch, the noise draws attention. Feltz is done playing games and unleashes his immense power to destroy everything in his path. He has finally located his target, which is bad news for our protagonist, especially since he only has 2 more uses of his position transfer left. His priority is to find the gate rather than fight, but at this point, the author inside Adele's body starts to feel the pressure of this manhwa plot, so he consults with Adele's true spirit and asks for the gate's location. Since it's secret knowledge, it comes with a price, 100 gold coins, or a special relic of a certain rank or higher. The author is furious that he has to negotiate something like this in the middle of a life or death trial. Unfortunately, Feltz's latest attack hits our protagonist, sending him flying and crashing into a tree on the ground. The ruthless captain readies his sword, asking if the villain truly thought he could live by simply running for his life. With a chilling smile on his face, Feltz promises that Adele will meet his end today. Despite being injured, the young man replies with confidence, a classic manhwa trope, that he didn't know much about anything. Except for one thing, he was determined to survive. Realizing he's already at death's door anyway, Adele gets up to use one last measure against his opponent. Feltz finds his persistence annoying, though he respects the half-demon for maintaining his pride as the patriarch of his family. In response, Adele reminds him that knights like the captain and his men shouldn't even feel a shred of dignity when they're ganging up on a child, but he literally ends his life by telling Feltz to change professions and become a nanny. Yeah, he's gonna need some ice for that burn. Completely provoked, the captain aims his sword at the target, coldly declaring that he will no longer hesitate to be ruthless. With his blade, he plans to make sure the sword pierces the boy's heart. Feltz lunges to deliver the killing blow, not knowing that this exact moment was what our protagonist was waiting for. He pulls out the special note he uses to communicate with Adele and makes it come into contact with Feltz's sword. You might not fully get it. Our protagonist is so clever that he used his opponent's special artifact as the price to get the answer to his question. This 200 IQ play, a staple in strategy manhwa, achieves his goal and also gets rid of Feltz's weapon. Adele has that gotcha, bro, smirk on his face as the captain's sword disintegrates into nothingness, to everyone's surprise. The location of the demonic gate is revealed as a reward for the artifact, and so our protagonist uses position transfer again to get away. Feltz tries to stop him, but the incompetent captain just lost his chance. The villain escapes to find his special gate. He finally finds the gate, which emanates red tentacles of dark energy, a familiar sight in this genre of manhwa. Adele has achieved his purpose, but this guy, Feltz, is like a damn cockroach. He throws a huge log at him just as it's about to make contact, and he activates the last use of his position transfer, promising to see the captain again someday. Feltz is frustrated because his target escaped into the demonic realm, setting up the next arc of this exciting manhwa. Some time passes, and we see Adele sitting alone, chewing on a piece of dried meat, wondering how much time has passed since he successfully crossed the gate and entered the dungeon. This dungeon was actually created by humans using secret demonic arts. Now he's surprised to find jerky and a bed placed there. Adele wonders if this place was intentionally used to protect some kind of treasure. There's also a special barrier that deflects any blade coming at it. Additionally, there's a stone guardian, which only makes the origin of this artificial dungeon in the manhwa more mysterious. The stone guardian looks creepy on its own, and even Adele knows that if he crosses the barrier to face it, he'll literally get slapped. So he's not going to try that. Finally, the special note lights up as Adele's true spirit communicates with the author, warning him of a penalty for manipulating the rules of the price. This is because he tried to use Felds' sword as a sacrifice. That trick will no longer work beyond this point. But even the author thinks it was crazy to have even been able to use it, and on top of that, he wasn't even punished for it. Suddenly, the author's attention is drawn to a stone that looks different from the rest on the wall. Upon interacting with it, he realizes that it's only thanks to Adele's powers that he can perceive certain things. An authoritative voice responds to his interaction with the stone, telling him that he does not possess the right to use that function. Our boy, a classic manhwa protagonist, strongly suspects that this stone must be the key to deactivating the barrier. Since he can't use it, he plans to find another way to get past it. He sees a stone that probably fell from the stone guardian's body. Even though it's just a rock, it might be useful to him in this case. Activating his position transfer skill, the author swaps places with the piece of stone, getting out safely without needing to activate the function, but the guy is so thrilled with his achievement that he completely forgets about the stone demon that was outside. The creature roars in his face, alerting him that he needs to be on his guard. The scene shifts to the demon castle in the kingdom, where the patriarch of the bear family named Crate watches his servants work busily. This plot shift is typical for a manhwa. He comments that it's probably due to his daughter's attempted raid that his people are working overtime. Crate doesn't know how to handle the situation. The issue is that if his daughter succeeds, she'll be granted the right to enter Satan, which is supposedly a demon school. And even if he strictly orders her to fail, she will rebel against his decision anyway. After all, his daughter is fully determined to achieve her goal of getting revenge on the murderous humans who killed her mother. Wow, that's a truly tragic burden for a girl her age. Regardless, her dad is worried she might get crushed in a ruthless demon school. Suddenly, one of his maids arrives to inform him about some trouble. Crate is visibly annoyed at being interrupted in his thoughts. The maid fearfully apologizes and informs her master that there's news about an unknown person in the hidden domain, a classic manhwa development. They have located several energy traces from that person having opened the gate, which is causing great confusion. Furthermore, their identity remains unknown. The only thing they know is that this person tried to interact with the gate's function from within. This puts the demonic patriarch in a contemplative state, wondering if that human was summoned through the demonic gate during the Great War, believing that the pest will die anyway. He thinks it's an insignificant matter for now. All he cares about is his daughter's exam going well. Craig is amused, considering the possibility of obtaining a pawn from the human side if things go his way. Anyway, let's get back to our manhwa protagonist, who instantly regretted his decision to leave the domain and teleported back inside for his own good. Clearly, the guy didn't expect a damn wolf to devour him alive. The creature watches him from the outside, as he realizes how bad his situation is. Even if he manages to break the barrier, he'll only put himself in even greater danger. Suddenly, our protagonist has a revelation. The wolf creature is made of stone. That means his ability might work on it. Activating the position transfer again, he forces the target to be the stone wolf outside the barrier. His plan works astonishingly well, a clever strategy you'd see in a top-tier manhwa, trapping the monster inside and freeing him from the barrier's confines. The wolf takes a moment to realize it's trapped, and, despite its multiple attempts, it can't break through the barrier. Adele runs to find an exit when, suddenly, he stumbles upon another terrifying creature from the abyss. He quickly realizes there's a mission on each level, and that this huge insect is even more threatening than the wolf he just escaped. The funny thing is that Adele keeps abusing his position transfer ability on the creatures, trapping the monsters again and again in this manhwa. It's thanks to their inanimate nature that he can abuse his powers to the fullest. Having finally reached the final stage of the hidden domain, a voice speaks to him, congratulating him for reaching the last obstacle. Surprisingly, it's a warm welcome, especially for a human like Adele. He deduces it must be the boss room, and what he sees is truly terrifying. A scene straight out of a dark fantasy manhwa, a Death Knight emitting a dark aura and showing off its immaculate armor. From the power emanating from its body, Adele compares its power to that of Captain Feldsbro, not even bothering to converse with the Death Knight and starts spamming his position transfer ability. Before the monster boss can even finish its sentence, the poor guy gets trapped inside the barrier. Adele moves forward and finds the treasure chest he was looking for. It's different from what he expected, as he didn't imagine it would have a special engraving. This black dragon ornament represents the highest-ranking demonic families. Among them are those of sloth, lust, gluttony, wrath, envy, and finally greed. The black dragon symbol represents the bear family, denoting the sin of pride. It's also the same family that Crate leads, Of course, this revelation alone poses a threat to our protagonist's existence, raising the stakes in this manhwa. He tries his luck and opens the box, hoping to find a way to escape. All he cares about for now is getting out of the demonic realm. But to his horror, a shadowy mist emerges from the box and attacks his face. The dark energy forces its way inside him. Unable to withstand the dark energy, Adele roars in pain. While his human body experiences extreme agony, the consequence looks brutal, hinting that his head exploded into 1,000 pieces. But apparently that's not what happened, because he wakes up later and is fine. His eye changed when the liquid black substance attacked him and gave him the Eye of Superbia, a special ocular ability seen in many a manhwa that enhances his dynamic vision, and it only activates after killing an enemy. Now, the bro thinks he's unstoppable because he can take on dozens of enemies at once. He's impressed by his decision to come to the demonic realm, and prepares for whatever's next, like a true manhwa protagonist. In front of the chest is a huge door. Adele wonders how he should act, since surely there will be a bunch of forces waiting outside to capture him. Leaving practically ensures his death, so he has to think of another way. He humorously imagines surrendering faster than light, but that's not going to work either. The problem right now is a classic manhwa dilemma. He belongs to the Arsen family, and the moment the demons find that out, they're going to kill him. That's why he decides to cover the insignia on his neck. As for the Death Knight from before, he keeps hitting his sword against the barrier and demanding to be released. The worried Death Knight warns him that Her Highness is on her way, but of course, Adele has no idea who that is. It was at that moment that he finally understood why there were stone beds and dried meat in the hidden domain. It's because this place is a testing ground used by the high-ranking families to train their children, a classic setup in this kind of manhwa. It's important for him to know what he's up against, so he immediately takes out his special note to communicate with the real Adele. The author asks who the closest character to him is right now. Once again, Adele's soul demands a sacrifice to answer that question. Unfortunately, the author is in a tight spot. So instead of paying with gold or artifacts, he spends 100 mana points, which is a brutal way to solve it. The answer is finally revealed. The person closest to Adele is Renee, the youngest daughter of the demonic patriarch of the Bear family. Our boy goes into, "Oh no, I'm screwed" mode, a familiar scene in this type of manhwa because there's no way he can beat her. The Eye of Superbia he stole was supposed to be her reward for completing the training, and he literally stole that achievement from her. Since she has a ton of authority in the demonic army, Adele assumes she's going to annihilate the Stone Guardians and appear before him, and that's exactly what happens, a dramatic entrance worthy of a manhwa antagonist. Renee slices the Death Knight to pieces and confronts the human with a serious expression, demanding to know his identity. Realizing there's genuinely no way out of this, Adele surrenders, kneeling before her. In fact, he manipulates her by telling her that she successfully completed the hidden domain and became worthy, but the demon princess is genuinely annoyed and doesn't buy a word of it, sweating bullets, knowing he could die right there. The author lies to her, saying he is supposedly her bodyguard assigned by her father, a common trope in this manhwa. He's also glad that she still hasn't noticed he possesses the Eye of Superbia, with a distrustful look towards the parasite in front of her. She mocks him for looking pathetically weak for a bodyguard. Adele emphasizes that he is actually quite capable. Despite his appearance, she starts to feel slightly optimistic about this encounter, lowering her sword and laughing. In an attempt to win her trust, Adele switches positions with his sword, surprising Renee by appearing right before her eyes. He does nothing to attack her, simply asking if she was impressed by his skills. Renee grabs his hand and then yanks it away. She says nothing, leaving him confused, wondering what she thinks of him now. Trying to keep it casual, he tells her they should head out together, as the patriarch is awaiting their arrival. This man is a top-tier gaslighter. Oh my god. Adele also tells her he will handle other tasks assigned by her father. Inside, he knows he has to hurry and get out of there as soon as possible, or he is doomed. Finally, he opens the door, causing Renee to jump in surprise at the sight of her father. She did not expect him to be there with his men. Intrigued by the whole situation, Creed takes an interest in the human. Meanwhile, our manhwa protagonist is questioning his existence because now he has to come up with an excuse to trick the dad too. They will kill him on the spot if they find out what he has done. But for some reason, Creed has not moved a single finger yet. Creed addresses his daughter and asks if she completed the domain. After confirming that she did, the patriarch asks the human to accompany him. Unsure of what awaits him, the protagonist wonders what is about to happen. He quickly follows and cannot even check his special note because he has no mana left, or items to offer. Upon arriving at the Verse family mansion, Creed instructs everyone else to return to their rooms. Happy to have a chance to escape, Adele celebrates internally, until he realizes there are guards discreetly watching him, in case he tries to disobey orders. In his office, Creed meets with his daughter. noting that Renee has successfully completed the final trial, but he still wants her to be sure of her decision to enter the training school. Renee is determined to go and responds that she is. Creed is silent for a moment, before asking about the human she found on the reward stage, recalling how he surprised her with his skills. Renee confirms he is someone strong. This pleases the patriarch, who seems excited about the mysterious human. He concludes their conversation by approving his daughter's entry into the Saitan school. As for Creed, he is not even really thinking about his daughter. He is more impressed by the human who entered the domain and completed it on his own. Not to mention he claimed the Eye of Superbia, and yes, this basically confirms that he knows our protagonist possesses it. Finally, Renee's opinion is the strongest confirmation he could receive. All these factors point to one thing: he can use the human to his advantage. While all this is happening, the protagonist, completely lost, wonders how much longer he will have to wait for them to finish talking. Finally, he is instructed to present himself in the patriarch's room. He presents himself before Creed, who watches him with an intimidating gaze. Adele is already afraid of what is coming, and wonders how he is going to handle this. The demon patriarch asks why he allowed him to live. The patriarch cracks a smile, before cursing him for having the audacity to deceive his daughter so skillfully. He also releases an overwhelming amount of aura, a staple in any action manhwa, to the point that Adele is forced to kneel before him. He realizes that the patriarch has no intention of killing him, an observation that Creed finds amusing. Releasing the pressure, he allows the human to regain his composure, but Adele is still panicking from what he just experienced. Creed is impressed by the human's sharp mind and asks for his name. Adele replies with his name, without mentioning his family lineage. The patriarch then uses his demonic power to manipulate the human's body. And at this point, our protagonist has no idea what he really wants from him, a classic setup in this kind of manhwa. Creed orders him to open his mouth, and again, the demonic patriarch tells him that all he has to do is continue the story he was telling his daughter. As this happens, a dark energy enters the Creed, reminds him that the poison inside his body will kill the human instantly if he ever tries to deceive them. Adele can barely speak as he chokes on his own words, and Creed, with complete calm, tells him that he will offer him a decent place to stay later on. The one-sided encounter ends with Adele speechless. In the next scene, he is shown his new quarters. Unfortunately, Adele doesn't have many options other than to accept what he's been given in this shabby hovel. Still, he's relieved enough to have saved his life. Although he feels like he's being used as a tool, a common trope in this manhwa, he is also glad to have gained the patriarch's recognition, which could benefit him in the long run regarding his goals. That said, the guy has to do something about the poison inside his body. Making clever use of his position transfer ability, Adele manages to force the inanimate poison out of his body. He doesn't even want to think about the horrors that could have happened if something else had been teleported from his body. In any case, Adele doesn't want to kill the poisonous creature, knowing that it would alert the demonic patriarch. The creature awakens because its mana supply was cut off. Finally, Adele collapses onto his bed, knowing he is no longer threatened by the poison. The small creature sleeps peacefully beside him. He is about to fall asleep when the status window opens, a staple in any good manhwa, alerting him to his skill improvement. Position transfer has reached level 2, but the mana costs are too demanding. Adele wonders if there's a way to increase his mana pool so he can face the main characters of the story. He realizes that there is indeed a way to achieve that effect, a classic manhwa power-up path. The scene shifts to the face of the expressionless Renee, who disapproves of our MC's plan. For the past 3 days, he has been trying to get closer to her, but bro is being ignored as if he were left on red in real life. That's how bad things are. The author assumes she was supposed to have a brighter personality, but the loss of her mother turned her ruthless and distant. Even as the author of this manhwa, he feels sorry for what happened to her. The patriarch's servants call for both Adele and Renee because Creed has summoned them. Adele thinks it must be about Renee's admission to the demonic school of Satan. Of course, despite having overcome the hidden domain, Satan is on another level. Creed tells his daughter that she is destined to die sooner or later, and if that happens, she'll never achieve her goals. This leaves Renee with a disappointed and sad expression. Meanwhile, Adele feels like a typical third wheel in a father-daughter conversation. To both their surprise, the demon patriarch tasks the bodyguard with protecting his daughter, but what's truly surprising is that the girl immediately rejects the offer, which is quite funny, considering she's willing to give up her own goals just to get away from our protagonist. The thing about Saitan is that it's the only school where the promising heirs of multiple demonic kingdoms gather, and they are in constant conflict with the imperial school of the protagonists in the original manhwa. Renee was destined to die because of that conflict. It's the worst place on the planet, because death is always a matter of time for the demons there. Despite that, Renee is prepared to go. As for Adele, he thinks it's the perfect place to increase his power and his network. After all, as the author of this manhwa world, he knows the events that will occur at the school. Seizing the opportunity, Adele agrees to go, but he has one last request. He asks for something related to mana, which the patriarch finds funny because he thought the human, he would try to negotiate his way out of the poison. The good thing is that Creed hasn't realized that Adele no longer has poison in his body. Creed curses him a bit, but considers his request. Now that they are alone, Adele wonders what the patriarch will offer him regarding mana. Creed reveals that this particular treasure is part of his family's legacy, so he wants this whole matter to be kept confidential. Understanding that the human's mana is basically insignificant, the demon patriarch is willing to lend him a power that will help him survive for his daughter's sake. Creed channels his demonic energy and declares that he will teach the human his family's cultivation technique, which completely baffles Adele and leaves him in shock. The demon patriarch invokes the help of the demon god to bestow the powers of demons upon a human. Creed's chant comes to an end, and his body is enveloped in purple demonic energy. A smile forms on the patriarch's face, impressed that our protagonist has maintained his sanity, even after receiving the power boost. Adele learns that this cultivation technique will allow him to receive mana directly from the demon god, which basically means he now has an overpowered mana storage. Interestingly, Creed has noticed that the human's family has ties to the 7 deadly sins. Although the human tries to feign ignorance, the demon patriarch emphasizes that he is not worried about any betrayal coming from him, since, after all, the poison worm will take care of everything if he turns out to be a spy. The author is surprised to discover that the family of the half-demon is connected to the 7 deadly sins, especially since he, as the writer, never included that in the original manhwa. Creed tells him to leave, and in the next scene, we see our protagonist in the forest, meditating alone. He believes this place is suitable for practicing his powers, especially when his mana can get out of control easily. Normal meditation is supposed to be peaceful and quiet, right? Well, not for this guy. He's all tense, asking the demon god for help, knowing that after this, he won't be able to use human mana ever again. Still, he has no other choice. He has to fight for his survival. Menacing eyes watch him from the sky. The demon god considers this human a disgusting disgrace and even roars upon seeing him, accusing him of carrying the blood of a traitor. It's funny how Adele can be so sharp and so dense at the same time. He asks the demon god if he truly is the entity that rules over the demons in this manhwa world. This god is known as the god of pride. Adele asks him if he's going to survive this experience. The demon god replies that he would already be dead if that's what he wanted, but curiously, he chooses not to kill him. For some inexplicable reason, he feels a sort of kinship with him, which is why he's willing to help the human by granting him the mark of pride. This insignia represents the powers of the god of pride. However, the deity warns him not to lose his mind over these powers, as they could drive him mad. Adele has now acquired the power of a god, a classic manhwa trope, greatly increasing his chances of surviving in this hellish dimension. At this point, he thinks his entire body will end up covered in marks and tattoos. Suddenly, he senses someone spying on him from behind. Renee appears and they both stand there in shock. This is very bad for him, since, clearly, Renee's father didn't want her to know anything about this. She mutters the words, "Dark Priest," which go completely over his head. We jump forward 1 month, and Adele has been training relentlessly. His mana pool has tripled in that short period. He suspects that in a few years, he'll have enough accumulated mana to surpass the heirs of the 6 houses of the human kingdom. In his current state, he could easily conquer the hidden domain without needing to teleport. This manhwa is really showing his rapid growth. Aside from that, the guy wonders why Renee has lately been training in front of his house instead of at the training grounds. To satisfy his curiosity, he decides to confront her. Luckily, Renee isn't avoiding him like she stubbornly used to. Adele thinks the girl probably misunderstands him, believing he's some kind of priest capable of communicating with the demon god, since only they can do that. Fortunately, she didn't overhear the exact conversation he had with the god of pride. But in this case, being treated as someone superior to the demon king's daughter is only going to bring him more trouble. It's a complicated situation for our manhwa protagonist. Adele asks her to treat him like she did before. However, the girl feels a bit embarrassed for having treated him so coldly after seeing his power. Acting as her bodyguard, he reminds Renee that he's just following orders, so he'd also like her to treat him normally. Renee decides to take him up on that and orders him to bring her water. Bro doesn't get what she's plotting. Renee emphasizes that she's simply following what he just said, treating him coldly. Adele realizes he's going to have to follow all her orders. At this point, he just can't win. After bringing her the water, he reflects that he needs to conquer a domain. But unfortunately, Renee is stuck to him all the time. Besides, a bigger problem is looming. The original protagonist of this manhwa. He will soon cross into the demonic realm. Adele doesn't want to miss out on the domain's treasure, since the reward would help him survive in Saitan. He asks Renee about her preparations for the entrance exam, and she's a bit surprised he would ask such a thing. Adele reasons that eventually he will have to face the strongest humans. That's why he's worried, however. Renee doesn't seem concerned at all, stating she already has everything prepared. Adele suggests she double-check, because there could always be something important she's forgotten that might become a problem later. Renee gets annoyed by his vague language. Adele reveals that he is genuinely worried about her, but this girl is smart. She isn't easily manipulated. She quickly realizes he wants to go off on his own while she's away. His plan isn't completely foiled though, as Renee gets upset, thinking that perhaps he's already getting bored of her. To calm her down, Adele finally tells her the truth. He's interested in conquering a nearby domain. Instead of getting angry, she becomes contemplative and tells him that she actually had forgotten something, just as he said at the beginning. Our protagonist is pleased, but then she reveals that what she forgot was to warm up before training. In short, the girl wants to go with him to conquer the domain and use it as her warm-up. She thinks they could easily conquer it in a single day. Naturally, Adele is concerned, but he can't refuse his superior. Now, in this exciting part of the manhwa, let's explore more about this secret domain. It's called the Domain of the Undead, so you can imagine what's coming next. This place was once ruled by necromancers, but now it's just an abandoned site, filled with undead soldiers after the necromancers were annihilated in the war. Renee has a lot of knowledge about this domain, and that worries him, since it's a mid to high level domain. Right now, the number of undead soldiers is alarming, which is why Renee's help will be necessary for this mission. The only problem is that going together will make it harder for him to escape with her, and if news reaches the Patriarch, he'll get in trouble for putting her in danger. That's why he asks her not to go, arguing that the Patriarch would be furious if he finds out they left without his permission. But this demon girl already has it all figured out. She knows a secret exit from the mansion. She leads him to a secret passage that no one knows about. Adele realizes she must be used to sneaking out if she does this so naturally. Renee doesn't answer, and they both quickly use the exit. Upon reaching a mist-shrouded mountain range, the pair presses on. Adele asks how long it will take, but that seems to annoy her. He realizes he put his foot in his mouth and just tells her they should keep moving forward. Renee explains they'll have to climb the mountain, and that's all she says on the matter. It sounds easy, but for our manhwa protagonist, it's pure agony on the inside. They finally arrive at their destination. The place is destroyed and abandoned, and Renee curses in her native tongue while Adele thinks to himself that he must hide his family name from her at all costs. A classic manhwa plot point. Since he knows the way, they both dig out an entrance. The domain is located beneath a massive rock statue, with soldiers stationed below to protect their lands. Upon reaching the entrance, Adele offers to go in first for her, but a confident Renee wants to take the lead. Inside the domain, Adele is impressed by how brightly lit the place is. Renee finally arrives at the exact site they were looking for. Just from the emanating energy, the author deduces that it is an even more powerful region than the Bear family's training grounds, suspecting that at least 100 tombs are buried there. Renee and our protagonist continue to advance, when suddenly a skeleton and its companions emerge from the ground. These bald bags of bones surround the pair from all sides. Channeling her skills, Renee launches her attack and disintegrates the skeleton soldiers as if they were paper. Adele, at this moment, is very grateful to have brought her with him, as she's proving to be a top-tier manhwa heroine. He understands that there must be at least one necromancer summoning these soldiers, so they need to target him. He blocks an attack and tells Renee that he'll be right behind her, but the defeated soldiers simply rise again. To their surprise, the necromancer leading his troops watches them intently. Impressed by their audacity in having stepped into the domain, he orders his soldiers to eliminate both intruders. This is a classic manhwa predicament for the pair. As the undead soldiers keep reviving, Adele instructs Renee to keep moving forward and focus on the necromancer. For his part, he is busy helping to create an opening so she can fulfill her objective. After defeating more soldiers, the author tells her that he will handle this side, so she can concentrate on her role. Channeling her powers, the daughter of the demonic patriarch advances to kill the necromancer. The mage summons even more soldiers to stop them, but Adele knows this is a crucial manhwa battle. Thinks they need to focus on eliminating him quickly. If they manage to destroy the spellcaster's orb, the battle will be won, since he will be able to use the new position transfer skill. But their problems increase when suddenly a King Kong-sized skeleton appears. Adele worries about Renee, but instead of being defeated like any A weak Manhwa character, this girl ends up defeating the creature in a single blow. She is much more powerful than Adele thought. With this, he activates position transfer to reach him quickly. Now, with the most recent ability, he can swap objects with each other instead of himself, so he uses the swap spell, stripping the necromancer of his orb, and placing it directly into Adele's hand. That was all they really needed, because the Bone Mage is about to be defeated, unable to cast any spells with the orb destroyed, and finished. The necromancer is automatically defeated along with his summons, thanks to their combined efforts. They manage to eliminate the threat. Curiously, the necromancer's last words are of gratitude towards the human. Adele faces a harsh realization. He is the one who wrote the tragedy of this place in his story, and as the author of this manhwa. Because of that, he truly feels sad for his characters and hopes that they can now finally rest in peace. Renee asks him if there is anything else to do, besides the boss battle. Of course, there is the reward collection. He will finally be able to get the item he so desperately needs. The item is called the Fang of Darkness, a dagger made of a special steel from the demonic realm, an epic-grade weapon, even by Manhwa standards. With it, he can convert darkness into mana and increase abilities in the dark. The second item is a ring called the Eternal Full Moon, which allows the user to absorb mana rapidly through the moonlight. Adele is quite impressed by the haul of Manhwa tier items. Dagger and realizes he can maximize his darkness attribute with this weapon. As for the ring, he doesn't really have any use for it, so he offers it to Renee. She accepts the reward, acting somewhat flirtatiously. Adele, like a gentleman, places the ring on her finger, causing her to blush visibly from the experience. She quickly pulls her hand back, acting flustered, which leaves our dense protagonist clueless as to why she's acting like that. Renee, somewhat embarrassed, feels the effects of the ring coursing through her body. She likes it a lot. Next, Adele decides to keep all the gold from this place. But our protagonist's dreams are crushed when Renee goes into kill machine mode and warns him not to be selfish with the domain. With the domain cleared, the pair returns to the mansion just before dinner. Then they continue training together, and another month passes. Eventually, our protagonist makes great strides in the demon realm, having accumulated around 1,300 mana, a power level you'd see in an action manhwa, which is comparable to mid-level demons in the realm. Finally, the demon patriarch summons them a few days later, granting them the opportunity to enter Satan. The time has finally come for both of them. They will go to the capital for the entrance exam. With the preparations ready, the patriarch orders them to leave, not even caring for a proper farewell. Seeing Renee's expression, Adele realizes she is sad. She simply bows to her father and leaves. Then, our protagonist does the same to accompany her. But before he leaves, the father stops to remind him that he has great expectations for the human. This manhwa scene is sad in a way. The patriarch is wishing hope upon a human, but not his own daughter, who needs it the most. In the next scene, their carriage is ready as Crate watches them from above. Our protagonist realizes that even demons must have considerate feelings for their children, because he can tell that Crate truly cares for his daughter. Right now, our protagonist may be worried about his future, but he is willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals at the demon school of Satan. Their journey, straight out of an adventure manhwa, begins with a bumpy ride. Since they left the mansion, Renee has been terrifyingly quiet. He wonders if it's his fault. Finally, she turns to look at him with a strong gaze, reflecting that he is much more handsome than she had initially thought. This man is here talking about the weather, because he has nothing else to talk about. Even she thinks he's a bit dense and not particularly strong at this point. She's starting to doubt her assumptions about his rank as a priest. Meanwhile, Adele wonders why she's staring so much. Renee calls herself a fool for doubting his powers when she witnessed his conversation with the literal god of pride. The way they are both thinking about each other is funny, because Adele thinks he's in trouble, while she's over here in classic manhwa fashion, starting to fall for him. Now, let's talk about what our protagonist did before giving her the ring. It's actually called an eternal vow in his dimension, and basically, it's their way of marrying someone. Although Adele did it without saying a word, she is curious about the kind of vow he made by doing something like that. The demon who used to be indifferent is now genuinely interested in knowing his feelings. Anyway, Adele reminds her they'll arrive in 1 hour. His empty words only make her more annoyed, because she was just here daydreaming about a romance in her head. Without saying anything to him, she simply decides to take a nap, leaving Adele in the dark. 1 hour later, they get off the carriage with their packed luggage. The Demon Kingdom's capital is huge and looks a lot like the Human Kingdom's capital, a common setting in many a manhwa. Although the demons here have horns and some physical differences, they aren't that hard to tell apart from humans. The elite demons are known for having marks on their bodies, like a blonde guy who has them on his neck. Renee tells him to hurry up and he follows her, asking where they are headed. Since the entrance exam is in 2 days, they need to register before that. Since it's in 2 days, Adele suggests taking a tour of the capital in the meantime, but she seems uninterested and doesn't want to travel. Adele still thinks he messed up, but she again dismisses him to go register for the exam. Recalling the backstory he wrote for her in this manhwa, the author realizes that Renee never left her home due to her mother's death, so she should be feeling a sense of freedom here. Yet for some reason she seems uninterested in her surroundings. Anyway, they're finally at Saitan, an incredible university that's 3 times the size of a common one, just like you'd see in an epic manhwa. The receptionist here is an old man who handles the registration process. Adele steps forward to speak on behalf of his lady, much to the man's surprise, who points out that Adele doesn't even look like a demon in the first place. Even worse, the receptionist calls him a half-demon trying to apply for the Saitan exam. At this point, our manhwa protagonist knows that his future here will be really painful to handle. The receptionist keeps ranting until he recognizes the princess's horns. Renee mentions that she's from the Veer house, and that her guard will be admitted along with her, but the guy keeps criticizing, calling her guard a pathetic half-demon trying to enroll in the best demon academy, a typical trope in this kind of manhwa. Renee doesn't want to hear his arrogant words anymore, and reveals a hint of her power for insulting the Veer family. The guy wants to get into trouble for no reason at all. Just do your job, Baldy. Anyway, Adele mentions his name and the association with the Pixie House, and with that, the registration process is completed. To explain why the receptionist behaves this way, the author reflects that during the war, half-demons ended up siding with humans, a key plot point in this manhwa, and that's largely why the pure-blooded demons are upset with them. Anyway, with the registration done, they need to get to their inn for the night. After locating a tavern that looks pretty good, Adele thinks it should be enough. But this rich, spoiled girl has her own complaints about the taverns here. Adele reminds her that they don't have her dad's money to splurge, so their options are limited. Crit only gave them 10 gold pieces, which will be enough for them to live on for 1 month, since the Veer house suffered great losses after the war, so they can't afford to overspend. The pair goes inside to book a room. Adele handles all the talking for her. The funny thing is, Renee blushes the moment she hears the receptionist ask if they want to share a room. The guy insists they get separate rooms. Since they'll have 2 different rooms, the cost will be 2 gold pieces in total. It's not the worst deal in the world. According to the author, Renee goes upstairs while Adele says she's going to unpack the luggage so she can rest. Since she has always lived in a giant mansion, the author suspects that this is her first time living in a place as modest as this, but she needs to get used to it as quickly as possible. As for him, he's going to need all the rest he can get for the upcoming exam. The 2 days finally passed, and the day of the exam arrived. The applicants are told to follow strict instructions. There are so many applicants around them, which makes the author wonder if there are at least 100 candidates. The fact that so many talented people are signing up to kill humans is a warning sign for our protagonist, a common trope in this kind of manhwa, because the moment his identity is leaked, everyone will be on him. The exam supervisor orders the students to take out their identification and get on the train. It's the last thing he expected in the demon realm for demons. As the world building in this manhwa shows, they have installed dimensional gates to block intruders trying to enter their kingdom. Trains are the only way to get across Satan. And at this point, the author wonders how big Satan must really be to have a train system so easily installed. The 2 of them get on the train and reach their destination in the blink of an eye. The 2 are finally in front of the Great Demon Academy. The applicants are told to follow their guide and enter the auditorium for the exam. They go inside, and Adele is left speechless by the luxurious decorations. Every glance leaves him overwhelmed. He also notices that only young demons, a common sight in Academy manhwa, have come to take the exam, which makes it likely that the other heirs of the 7 deadly sins are also present. Dressed in long black cloaks, the author realizes that these people must be the instructors. Now he wants to make a good impression right away to increase his chances of having a good time in this hellhole. Renee mentions that their exam is about to begin. The doors immediately close, and the once brightly lit place becomes eerily dark. The author suspects that magic, a staple in fantasy manhwa, was used to achieve this effect and is curious about the content of the exam. The first order comes from a female instructor who demands that the applicants be quiet. With a distinctive appearance and short stature, she welcomes everyone to Satan and begins to curse out the poor candidates. She openly admits that she hopes to see them die this year. Wow, what a welcome. Adele trembles at the sheer power in her voice, as the instructor smiles maliciously. The woman gets serious to attend to business and begins the exam procedure without giving them another word of warning. The pressure emanating from her body, typical for an overpowered character in a manhwa, is enough to make every student feel overwhelmed. One after another, the weak candidates are quickly filtered out. The instructors are not surprised by the way the headmistress cruelly handles the exam. Yes, that psycho is actually the headmistress of the academy, a classic manhwa twist. Furthermore, this test is one of mental fortitude. The reason Headmistress Lucian chose this test is because she wants to see if the candidates have enough power to withstand an interrogation by humans, should the situation come to that. 5 painful minutes were endured by the candidates, and almost none of them were left standing, except for Renee, Adele, and 6 others. The instructor initially had high expectations for the 100 candidates who took the exam, yet this is still more impressive than last year, which is already a good improvement. This particular group of candidates includes the heirs of the 7 deadly sins. The instructors were certain of their arrival, however, they are surprised to find a stranger holding his ground. This boy is different from the heirs of the demonic families, and the fact that he has maintained his sanity for 10 minutes is proof of his caliber. However, beyond this point, the instructors believe the boy will fall. Although Adele is experiencing extreme agony, the male instructor perceives a pulsating dark energy emanating from his body. Everyone is surprised, including Headmistress Lucian. The boy now looks like a demon god with this sudden transformation. Sensing the danger of the situation, the male instructor feels the need to act and eliminate the candidate immediately. At first glance, it was clear to everyone that the boy didn't seem special, but the moment he made the very atmosphere around him crumble, they recognized his infernal killing intent, like something from a dark fantasy manhwa. It was a ruthless intent, as if he were one of the worst-known assassins, which is why the instructor wanted to act immediately. But despite his readiness to act, Lucian observes that the instructor is hesitating. He is afraid of confronting a formidable threat, even though the boy is just an applicant. His colleague smirks as the rest of the candidates are exhausted. At that moment, our protagonist understands that if he does not find a way to withstand this test, he is going to fall apart. His mental state will collapse, and he will go insane, just as the god of pride warned him. Then an idea sparks in his mind. What if he used his killing intent to counteract the aura of the woman conducting the test? So he does exactly that. Knowing he cannot just wait around, his body emits tentacles of red demonic energy, a classic manhwa power-up, counteracting the headmistress's aura. Lucian is so impressed that she wants to increase her aura's intensity to subdue him, but the author is on the verge of going mad, and in fact, holds his ground even after Lucian increases the intensity. This catches her attention, and he finally manages to survive the test. Although he should be worried about himself, his attention turns to Renee, who is holding his position without much trouble. The same goes for the other heirs of the 7 deadly sins. The heir of envy, Baltan, the heir of lust, Samuel, the heir of gluttony, Aaron, the heir of sloth, Gear, and the heir of greed. All of them are holding their ground. The author comments that he wrote some of these characters for his manhwa with passion, but in the end, these significant characters are all killed by the story's heroes, a tragic fate in this kind of manhwa. He notices the 6 members and finally turns his gaze to the heir of wrath, a beautiful girl, with long snow-white hair, wearing a crown of thorns and possessing ruthless, scarlet eyes. It was at that moment that he found himself looking at the worst villain in the story he wrote, the ultimate final boss of his manhwa. He was facing the future demon lord, Diana. The first part of the exam has concluded, but Adele is busy collecting his thoughts. Normally, the Demon King comes from the family of Wrath, so Diana basically has no need to be here at all. And yet, despite being the Demon Lord's successor, she has come to apply as a candidate. This makes him wonder if something went wrong in the story. Anyway, the candidates who failed are being kicked out for not passing the test. Most of them are spoiled brats complaining about the cruel nature of the exam, but the instructors couldn't care less, that they're so conceited. They make it very clear to these rich fools that their money is worthless here. The male instructor emphasizes that applicants who couldn't even survive for 5 minutes are not needed at the academy, so the gates are closed to the failed candidates. Just from this first exam alone, it's enough to show how ruthless the Demon Academy is, a common trope in this kind of manhwa. Fortunately, Adele passed. He also observes that Lucian is actually the director instead of a typical supervisor. She is the strongest person in the demon realm. Despite her cute appearance, he knows that even though he was lucky to survive the first test, he needs to hold his ground for the next ones, as this manhwa is just getting started. Since most people fail the second exam, while this is happening, the protagonist notices that Renee is drawing a lot of attention. She has many fans for being so strong, a fact the manhwa art really emphasizes. It makes sense that the heirs of the 7 deadly sins are famous figures. They were able to withstand Lucian's aura as well. Poor Adele. He's a little disappointed that he's not being noticed like the others, especially since he also held his ground. Renee approaches, praising her supposed bodyguard for making it through. The protagonist is satisfied that he's shown the instructors he's not just some normal candidate, a crucial step for any manhwa hero. With this impression, they will surely remember him, or so he thinks. The male instructor demands their attention and properly introduces himself as Ares, the instructor in charge of their education. This guy looks so intimidating that Adele thinks he probably always keeps a secret knife in his pockets. Ares congratulates the candidates who passed and explains the purpose of the exam, to test their mental fortitude, in case they need to be interrogated by humans. The 8 applicants who survived will receive extra points and, if they succeed in the second exam, they will all get access to weapons. It's like Christmas for our protagonist, who is as happy as can be, for getting the chance to earn such a great prize. Meanwhile, the other candidates are even more upset about failing now. Ares begins to explain the nature of the second exam. First, they will show their abilities, regarding the types of talents each of them possesses for confronting humans. They will be assigned a class depending on this specific exam, so they must be careful to show their very best. Adele understands what is being asked of the applicants. This is a classic power scaling test in a battle manhwa, though he wonders what kind of humans they will have to face in this exam. Ares shows them the opponent they will be facing in this special test, and with a snap of his fingers, he summons a creature born from the essence of light, wearing a distinctive set of armor and carrying a recognizable sword. Adele realizes immediately that they are about to be annihilated by the hands of the strongest hero from the 6 great human families, a shocking twist in the manhwa. It's basically the definition of fighting the final boss of the game when you're at level 2. This manhwa is really throwing an overpowered guy at them. Renee notices his reaction and wonders if he knows about the guy. Of course, as for Adele, he can't even reveal that they are going to face Nina and Sel, the head of House Nina, and a man closely related to the main story's protagonist. To make matters worse, the author realizes that the overpowered cousin of John Wick is actually the protagonist's father, the Sword Saint, who remains undefeated purely through his talent. Some of the candidates are smart enough to recognize who he is and have already lost hope of passing this test. It's no surprise they know him, since this guy is a one-man army, is responsible for taking down multiple demonic houses on his own. Of course, even Ares understands that the guys will be slaughtered in a direct battle against the Sword Saint, which is why Miel will use no more than 10% of his strength in the fight. Initially, Renee thinks this exam is going to be too easy with those odds, but the author is carefully reminded that they are facing a literal apocalypse-level threat, a staple of the monster manhwa genre within a human's body. Even with just 10% of his power, the Sword Saint can easily destroy cities. This makes Adele curious about how these applicants will pass the exam. He thinks there must be some kind of criteria at play and, although the information scroll could be really useful here, he has no money to waste on it. Ares announces that they are going to divide the applicants into teams of 4 to face him directly. To make it fairer, the top 8 will be separated from each other and the other candidates will be randomly assigned. The guy is really happy to be included on that list, while Renee is a little annoyed because her teammates are freeloading off of her. As for Adele's team, well, these guys are already making his life impossible just for existing on the same team. Renee gives him a little pat on the shoulder, telling him to come back safe and sound. Adele happily wishes her the same, and that's how the 33 groups were formed. Adele was the leader of the last group, and his teammates were Kina, Chris, and Sanchez. As the author, he doesn't recognize any of those names, which means they are basically characters NPCs with no specialty to move the manhwa's plot forward. Kina and Chris are very friendly and greet him nicely, but Sanchez seems to be an arrogant emo with issues. He immediately attacks our MC with his words, shaming him for being a half-demon. The situation is so bad for the author that even trash-tier NPC characters are here roasting him alive. The world of this manhwa is truly unforgiving. He ignores him and encourages the group to do their best. First, he wants to clarify some roles within the team, so he starts with Chris. In an attempt to better understand his abilities, Chris cooperates well and shows his mana transformation ability, which allows him to turn a triangular prism into armor and a sword. Although his skills don't have much killing intent, they are versatile and can be used in various ways. This is a very good sign for Adele, who is looking for just that type of teammate. Kina is next, and she explains that she's a support player, a classic role in RPG manhwa, rather than a damage dealer. With her powers, she can amplify her allies' speed by offering a prayer to the demon god. After casting her buff on Adele, she feels really exhausted, but our MC teases her by making jokes about her ability. Anyway, this is really, really bad for him. The girl's spell is practically demon-level weak, so he has no idea how she managed to pass. The last one is Sanchez, who shows off his rock-type enhancement ability. The guy literally transforms into a rock man. Finally, Sanchez demands that the leader show his skills by throwing a ring at him. Our protagonist simply teleports to him with godlike speed, leaving Sanchez stunned, since in a real battle, he could have killed him at any moment. Kina and Chris are very impressed by their leader's unique teleportation ability, a classic OP skill in any manhwa. In his mind, our protagonist decided to keep the rest of his powers a secret, because he doesn't know what they will face in the future. As for the team formation, he wants Chris and Sanchez to prioritize defense. He will take the center, and Kina will provide support from the rear. It sounds like a good enough formation for the exam, so they all agree in unison with that. The second exam is about to begin, as Ares calls the designated teams to come forward. Group 1 is the first in line. Our protagonist is impressed to see that the candidates have a fiery look of determination, even though they were facing the Sword Saint, though it doesn't matter much, because the moment the exam begins, it also ends in that same instant. Group 1 is annihilated, and not even Adele could see the Sword Saint during that brief moment. Ares calls Group 2, which is also wiped out. Group 3 suffers the same fate, and upon calling Group 4, the candidates rebel against the ridiculous nature of the exam, claiming this manhwa-style test is rigged from the start. Ares disqualifies the two candidates complaining about the test and asks the remaining two members if they still want to participate. Adele notices a blonde boy who steps forward to take the exam despite being disabled, and at that moment he reflects that this must be the hidden part of the puzzle to pass the second exam. The test for Group 4 begins with the two boys facing the Sword Saint. The outcome is already decided, as both are instantly defeated. If he had used a real aura, they would have been torn to pieces. Even our protagonist's team now doubts their abilities. Sanchez is practically trembling with fear. The Sword Saint continues annihilating groups until Group 10 comes up and immediately surrenders. Finally, Group 20 is called, and all teams up to 30 are eliminated. From there, none managed to even land a decent blow. It was a fight against an unbeatable opponent, a common setup in this manhwa genre. To his surprise, one of the candidates actually manages to block an attack. Interestingly, Adele notices that the fights are getting progressively longer due to the skill difference between each group. He is now even more certain of what the condition for passing the test is. His team is a little scared because it will soon be their turn to face him. Of course, our brilliant manhwa protagonist tells them his plan. He has deciphered the exam's criteria and believes they must fight and hold out for as long as they can. After observing how the instructors are handling the applicants, he is even more convinced of his theory, a classic manhwa deduction. Sanchez tries to object, but it's already too late. Their group is called to the front. Our protagonist is confident enough to believe they can defeat the Sword Saint in a direct confrontation. His words encourage his team, and they prepare to last longer than any other duel seen so far. Deep down, Adele plans to use the talent of the strongest villain in this manhwa's history to manipulate the odds in his favor. The fight begins with an interesting formation: Chris, Sanchez, Adele, and finally their support. Since he doesn't have much information about the Sword Saint compared to other characters, he wonders what they should do in this difficult situation. He tells the team to gather information as the Sword Saint launches his first attack. Our protagonist roars to warn them in advance, but with a single slash of his sword, the barrier shield shatters, and not even Sanchez can block the attack. The author tells Kina to prioritize strengthening Chris, so they can mitigate the impact of his fall after being thrown into the air. He then orders Sanchez to do his job, which is basically to tank all the damage head-on thanks to his hardening skill. As the tank of this manhwa party, they manage to block the first attack. Adele quickly assesses a gap between the second slash and realizes it's a trap from his opponent. He doesn't want to take advantage of it because he believes it's bait to lure them in. Focused on the battle, he informs his squad about the approaching second attack. The team gets into position, but Chris is the first to face his limitations. So far, just one attack was enough to wipe out their team, so this next one will finish the job if they're not careful. The Sword Saint unleashes his attack, showing the same opening. This time, not even Sanchez can withstand his strength, as his body suffers severe cuts from defending the team. Sanchez believes they're going to die, but Adele insists on holding out as long as possible, trying to predict their opponent's next move. Finally, the Sword Saint lowers his sword, but unfortunately, the test is not yet over. He's about to unleash a final attack, but Adele wants to face it head-on, a malicious expression forming on his face. The author declares that he will drive a sword into his opponent's throat, a declaration that surprises his team. The Sword Saint prepares for his final attack, and Adele tells Sanchez to withstand it without Chris's intervention. It's a crazy idea, but Adele knows what he's doing. The Sword Saint practically destroys Sanchez's armor and launches him toward the ceiling. It's at that moment that the author uses the position transfer skill to swap places with Sanchez, and in the small opening he's given, he activates the transfer again to focus on his opponent's sword. After making the blade disappear from his hand, He aims directly for the Sword Saint's throat with a black dagger as his final move. The attack stuns the rest of the instructors, but unfortunately for our protagonist, he fails to land the finishing blow and receives a kick so hard he spits up blood. Still, he remains a persistent opponent in this manhwa battle. The author activates his darkness trait to envelop the surroundings. It's thanks to Chris's previous barrier that he survived the kick, otherwise, his body would have been completely disabled. Although his attack failed, he managed to trap the Sword Saint inside a barrier without a single trace of light. In this void, he has a clear advantage with the Blade of Darkness in his hand. In a place like this, he practically has unlimited attack power, so he's confident in his strategy. Or at least that's what he thought, because the Sword Saint turns around menacingly and throws him a blood-curdling glare before appearing right in front of his eyes for another attack. Even Adele thinks he's facing a monster more demonic than any demon, a villain straight out of a horror manhwa. But luckily, thanks to his control over darkness, he pulls out the dagger from a blind spot and aims at his opponent. This time, the Sword Saint didn't anticipate that our protagonist could summon hundreds of dimensional daggers, activating the skill as they pierce the Sword Saint's body like projectiles, impaling him all over. The black void state confuses Adele's companions, while Ares realizes the fight is over. From the dark mist emerges a single standing warrior and a defeated one on the ground. Adele is the victor, and his performance has left all the candidates speechless in a classic manhwa power display. His strategy worked and even impressed one of the heirs. His companions run to him, celebrating his brilliant plan. Our protagonist is smart and doesn't go into detail about how he defeated the Sword Saint. As for Sanchez, the poor guy is in really bad shape, but the instructors are already helping him. To the team's surprise, the exam isn't over yet. Adele explains that they must complete one last step, plunging the blade deep into his opponent's body. He demonstrates his cruelty in front of the instructors, which even amuses the heirs. Fran thinks he's quite impressive for a half-demon, however, she also believes he's still naturally inferior to pure bloods. Her words have just infuriated Renee, who begins to release a murderous aura. In response, Fran wonders what is causing the bear princess to behave so aggressively. A chill runs down her spine. Fran's servants are pathetic simps who believe she will defeat Renee. Back with Adele, he notices Renee radiating bloodlust and wonders what's happening. But that's not the most important thing right now, as instructor Ares approaches him and asks if he knows why he's there. Seeing his carefree response, Ares turns away and tells him that he will be watching him closely. Adele is a bit disappointed that he didn't receive any praise or anything of the sort. At that moment, a fight is brewing between Renee and Fran. Adele wonders who the demon Renee is facing, a new rival in this manhwa's plot. From her appearance, he realizes she belongs to the House of Lust, but it makes no sense for her to be challenging Renee, of all people. Adele admits to himself that he was naive to have only focused in depth on the human characters while neglecting the demons. Fran sees the half-breed from a distance and calls out to him directly. For this reason, the guy didn't expect it even more, ordering him to become her slave. Upon hearing that, Renee becomes even more enraged, ready to kill. She lunges forward to unleash her first attack upon seeing her guardian being disrespected by the incarnation of lust. Lady Renee charges with her sword drawn, not giving Laurel front time to react. The two would have clashed if not for the instructor's intervention, who warned them that unnecessary disputes within the Saitan campus are strictly forbidden. This is a common rule in Academy Manhwa. If they want to tear each other apart, they should resolve their conflict outside the school. The students watching the fight were stunned. It would have escalated if Ares hadn't intervened. Something terrible could have happened to two of the top candidates from the Seven Deadly Sins family. Renee immediately sheathed her sword with a snort, while Laurel trembled with a nervous smile. Adele went to check on his boss. She looked at him silently as he signaled for her to go up on stage, instead of joining his group for the exam. Lady Renee took out a handkerchief and wiped Adele's sweat instead of ignoring him. She gently wiped his face and praised his performance. It should have been me, not him, thought Laurel, who clearly hadn't learned her lesson and criticized Lady Renee for getting too close to a half-demon. Adele ignored her racism and simply was happy to be treated a bit better after passing the exam. Looking him in the eye, Lady Renee asked him if he had hidden his strength during the test. Adele was confused. He had to risk everything just to land that one attack. Finally, Group 34 was called to the stage, and Renee calmly walked up, promising to keep Adele's true strength a secret. She must think he's some all-powerful priest from a major family, like a hidden character in a manhwa. With Lady Renee out of the picture, Laurel Fran pounced once more to bother Adele. Hearing her name, a cunning smile spread across her face. Seductively, not liking that she had been interrupted earlier, she ordered Adele to leave Renee and serve her instead. Laurel believed that with her charm, she could steal this nobody guard to avenge her earlier humiliation. But, completely indifferent, Adele rejected her with utter nonchalance and turned his attention back to Lady Renee's performance, while Laurel threw a childish tantrum. He focused on the stage. Adele had high expectations for this Manhwa-style showdown for the children of the other 7 deadly sins families, but he was rooting for Renee. The Sword Saint had been reconstructed, emitting a chilling aura throughout its entire attack range. It was an intense standoff, and like a true Manhwa heroine, Renee showed not a hint of fear. In fact, she stepped forward, completely ignoring the 3 nobodies in her group. Her actions caught the attention of even the future Demon King, Balting. The heir of envy chuckled at her audacity, a scene worthy of any great manhwa. Adele, on the other hand, felt every internal alarm bell go off. Logically, approaching the Sword Saint was a death sentence in this kind of manhwa world. When the two were just inches apart, the duel of auras began. An old man and a young woman faced off to see who could better dominate the surroundings with their presence. After what felt like an eternity, both of their expressions twisted with ferocity. The Sword Saint tried to stab her, but ended up being split in 2. Its sword and torso were cut in half. Everyone was left speechless at the young woman's display of dominance, a classic power flex in this manhwa. She didn't waste another second on the test or even glance back at her victim. Lady Renee silently returned and was met with cheers. Even from instructor Ares was visibly pleased with her performance. Perhaps the most surprised of all, even in this action-packed manhwa, was Adele. The Sword Saint must have sensed her fighting prowess, and that's why it didn't dare to attack first. Like a true sore loser, Laurel scoffed at Renee's performance. Curious, Adele asked the heiress of lust if a team composed of the heirs of the 7 deadly sins could defeat the real Sword Saint at full power. She laughed and replied that no living being can currently defeat the true Sword Saint. Perhaps if the previous Demon King were still alive, they would stand a chance. Besides, anyone with eyes could see that the pathetic imitator they're using for this test is much weaker than the supposed 10% power the instructors claim. Adele just realized he had a ton of trouble against a copy that doesn't even have 1/10 of the real power. He created this manhwa world, but he's too ignorant about the demon realm. Still, anticipation makes his heart pound. The remaining groups yet to be tested are all led by heirs of the 7 deadly sins, a classic trope in this kind of manhwa. Perhaps they were motivated by Renee's performance, but the other heirs also proved why they are who they are, all of them destroying the fake Sword Saint with ease, so it's hard to gauge the difference between the various families. But Adele already knows who the top 2 in this group are, the 2 who will become key characters in the future. Once everyone had their turn, the entrance exams finally concluded. After gathering everyone in front of the podium, Instructor Ares announced that everyone who had the courage to engage in combat, regardless of the outcome, earned a passing grade. With this, the remaining youths are now official apprentices of Satan. Ares warned them not to celebrate just yet, as all they had done was buy their ticket to a hellish path that has already broken many demons before. For those who passed, the initiation ceremony will take place in 2 days. Those who managed to defeat the Sword Saint must stay a little longer. Adele figured this had to be related to the promised reward mentioned during the first test. The heirs of the 7 deadly sins, along with Adele, passed with honors and will have the chance to enter the arsenal. Before that, Balton raised his hand with a question. He wanted to know if they could walk out of the arsenal with a bunch of weapons in hand. He's excited to see what Satan has in store for him. This delusional question is typical of the son of envy, Balton, a truly memorable manhwa character with an insatiable curiosity and appetite. Adele remembers writing quite a bit about this guy in his novel. Instructor Ares calmly replied that the apprentices would have a very hard time progressing if they carried multiple weapons, so they will only be allowed to take one. Refusing to answer any more absurd questions, he led them to the arsenal. He touched the surface of a wall and a magic seal activated a hidden door, a scene straight out of an action manhwa that materialized before everyone's eyes. Ares added that this was a privilege Satan granted only to outstanding apprentices. Whether they chose well or poorly was entirely up to fate. Instead of looking like an armory, the entrance looked more like a dungeon gate from a fantasy manhwa. Ares instructed the participants to enter in the reverse order of the exam and that they would be inspected on their way out. That gave Balton the first choice and Adele the last. It's clear the big guy isn't very fond of him. Excited to get the first treasure for himself, Balton brazenly waved at everyone before entering. Since Lady Renee already had a decent weapon, she planned on picking up some artifact inside, and Adele was thinking of doing the same. Since they were thinking about it, surely the other heirs would be considering it too. All the good artifacts might be gone before it was Adele's turn. Balton left the armory wearing a crown of black thorns, completely satisfied with his choice. The worst-case scenario was unfolding just as Adele had feared. Everyone was leaving with artifacts, and before he knew it, it was his turn. He saw the bracelet on Renee's wrist and asked about its functions. She simply told him to go inside and find out for himself. She also warned him about some items on display that have no descriptions. They might not have any flavor, text, but if they are stored in the armory, they shouldn't be junk, right? Just before entering, Adele shot Ares a look full of intention. Apparently, the big guy took offense and told him to speak up if he had something to say. With an awkward laugh, Adele asked him what the deal was with the items that had no descriptions. Ares briefly explained that those were artifacts and weapons with unknown purposes and no registered owner. If one is lucky, you can get an amazing relic. But just like in a manhwa, you could also receive a lifelong curse. With a final warning, Ares urged the last participant to enter. Adele would simply have to find out if going last was a good thing or a bad idea. Once inside, the structure changed dramatically. Surprisingly, it was a bright and orderly place, like something out of a high fantasy manhwa, though he felt a certain anxiety. He saw a light at the end of a long hallway and followed it. Upon reaching the armory proper, he was greeted by a breathtaking sight. Weapons and artifacts straight from a manhwa were sealed behind magic crystals, and all sorts of demonic relics filled the enormous room. Turning to his right, he found a unique-looking spear and read its description. It was the Spear of Twin Fangs, a weapon used by a nameless demon to hunt serpents. Vengeful snake spirits dwelled in its tip and, when infused with mana, 2 snakes would emerge. The description in this manhwa tried to make it sound important, but it was actually a rather mediocre weapon. Besides, Adele already had his daggers. Next, he examined the Starlight Crystal, once used by a talented astrologer. By injecting it with mana, the user could harness starlight to illuminate the surroundings. Basically, it was a fancy flashlight. Spotting an empty magic display case, he curiously looked at the description of the item that was once there. It was the Victor's Great Circlet, which granted exceptional recovery and resilience, binding to the user until the day of their death. That was surely what Baltan was wearing on his head. Adele found this strange. He remembered removing binding items in his original manhwa novel, so he didn't expect to encounter one here. Looking from side to side to inspect the place, he became more and more convinced that all the good items had already been taken. The Python's bind was gone, as were the demonic general's flag and the fallen noble's insignia. The 7 deadly sins had taken most of the broken artifacts, and almost all the remaining armor and weapons were little more than scrap metal. Thinking he had no other decent options left, Adele turned his attention to a cursed artifact, a staple of any good manhwa. But then he remembered a unique method only he could use. He took out his magic paper and decided to spend some gold. He approached a broken sword with no description and asked the paper for information about it. It asked for an artifact of a higher grade than a relic or 100 gold coins as payment. Before taking out his savings, he realized something else. In a classic manhwa protagonist move, he decided to test an idea that was forming, turning to a damaged scroll and doing the same thing this time. The paper asked for at least 50 gold coins for more information, given that the scroll evaluates importance based on cost. He realized he didn't even need to pay. He just had to see which item asked for the most. There were a total of 7 boxes without descriptions, and he quickly examined them. The information about a black, eagle-shaped stone cost only 1 gold coin. It was an obvious scam, since it only cost a single coin. Adele saw no problem in spending a little and learned the eagle's function. It exchanged its owner's fortune for another's misfortune. In other words, it was trash, a common trope in this kind of manhwa. Adele kept checking the unknown items. Some information cost 100 coins and another around 50. None seemed to be extraordinarily powerful. There were only 2 left to check. And finally, he found one that cost 300 gold coins, a pauldron. The paper estimated it was at least a mythic-grade artifact. This item, straight out of a high-tier manhwa, put all the other artifacts chosen by the heirs to shame. Just as he was about to decide on the pauldron, his attention was inexplicably drawn to the last item. Without a description that he hadn't explored yet, he felt a strange sensation of being watched, even though he was alone. The artifact was a simple necklace, but as is often the case in a manhwa, his keen senses were reacting. He took out the magic paper and asked for more information about the strange accessory. The paper glowed intensely and flew on its own. Emanating a blinding light, it showed a single phrase: "You must offer a god." This had to be at least legendary. Class. If it was asking for a god as a sacrifice, just when he thought he was doomed, he had actually been blessed. But thinking about it a bit more, he realized he was jumping to conclusions. Right now, he wasn't even associated with a lesser god, much less a demon god. For the moment, he decided to try infusing a bit of his mana into the mysterious necklace. After a few seconds, he got only absolute silence. It was frustrating. He had something extraordinary, right in front of him, and had no idea what it was capable of. He racked his brain trying other tricks with the paper, hoping to get some information out of it, by phrasing his questions differently. However, no matter how he asked, whenever it concerned the necklace, the paper demanded the offering of a god in exchange. Finally, he began to accept that he wouldn't get anything for free. Still, in a move worthy of a manhwa protagonist, he took the risk and chose the jeweled necklace as his reward. Regardless of its function, he was sure he had obtained the most valuable item in the armory. After equipping the accessory, he opened his status window to check for any changes. Just as he expected, an unknown trait appeared, a classic development in any progression manhwa. All that was left was to take his time to figure out what the item really was. When he left the armory, the instructor, Ares, asked him about his strange choice. Adele explained honestly that he chose an item with no description. When asked if he had any inside information, he answered honestly that he didn't. Technically, it wasn't a lie. Adele simply couldn't think of a good reason why the instructor was looking at him so suspiciously. Finally, the big guy gave in. Maybe it was a little suspicious, but he had to trust the words of his cadets. He turned to the most promising first-year students and advised them to take good care of their chosen artifacts, as they could be their lifelines. Adele scanned the room and saw figures who would soon lead the demonic world. They would undoubtedly receive a lot of investment and support in the future. If he managed to channel a bit of those resources for himself, he would be satisfied. Once it was over, the hidden door of the armory vanished without a trace. With the exams finished, it was time for the lady and the guard to return to their dorm. Before they could leave, someone stopped Adele. Just as he was about to take another step, a smiling Baltan approached to apologize for his earlier rudeness. He introduced himself properly and offered his hand to make peace. This came out of nowhere, but Adele wasn't one to refuse a courtesy. However, as soon as he shook Baltan's hand, he realized this guy was anything but polite. He squeezed his hand with brutal force, a mischievous smile plastered on his face, a classic power move in any manhwa. Adele felt a sharp, crushing pain shoot through his hand. Baltan is the type of person who couldn't care less about the weak, he's only interested in the strong. Driven by jealousy and envy, he once drove the protagonist of the original manhwa to the brink of death, but when he realized the main character's potential, he spared him just so he could face him again in the future. Yes, Baltan is a battle-crazed lunatic, and with that arrogant smile plastered on his face, he provoked Adele to get a reaction. So, Adele chose Baltan's sword as the target for his position-swapping technique. In a flash, he switched places with the sword, tapping the arrogant boy on the shoulder. The test was over, so Adele had no intention of playing along with the whims of a spoiled brat. Besides, that handshake nearly crushed his bones. In response, Baltan let out a laugh, amused. Seeing Adele's skill only fueled his fighting spirit more, a classic development in this kind of action manhwa. Before things could get out of hand, Lady Renee stepped in to stop the psycho, emitting her own chilling aura. She warned Baltan that she would join the fight if he continued his nonsense. Finally, the lunatic reined in his energy. As much as he loved to fight, facing two heavy hitters at once was too much. He didn't want to risk getting injured before classes even started. Besides, there would be plenty of opportunities for bloodshed later in this academy manhwa. He says he doesn't want to get injured, but he's fine with a death match, which is some wild manhwa antagonist logic. For now, it's time to retreat with the young lady. Despite all the craziness, Adele couldn't help but feel excited about life at Saitan. Back at the hotel, Adele woke up feeling refreshed. In the morning, the guy strolls around casually showing off his perfectly toned manhwa protagonist body just to make us mortals feel bad. He feels better and is getting stronger by the day. Excited, he took out the uniform that Satan Academy had sent him to try it on. This classic manhwa scene marks a new chapter for him, and the standard black blazer with patches, he was surprised by how comfortable it was. For 3 whole years, they aren't allowed to wear anything but the uniform, but at least it's practical. Eager to see Lady Renee and hers, he hurried to her room and knocked. Upon confirming it was her guard, Renee opened the door. Adele was left speechless at how beautiful she looked in the classic blazer and skirt, illuminated by the sunlight streaming through the window. He couldn't help but pay her a compliment, making the young lady blush. She might be cold-blooded with a sword, but her cute side was just as deadly to Adele. He had a rare day off and planned to walk around the city a bit. He bowed and advised her to rest. But before he could leave, she stopped him. With a red, shy face, she asked if he was forgetting something. She reminded him that he had a day off as a student, but not as her bodyguard. He had completely forgotten his main duty. Excited by the thought of resting alone, as a compromise, she decided to join him for a walk around the city after she changed. And just like that, his long-awaited day off vanished. but his regret was washed away by the city's vitality, which felt as vibrant as the world in a full-color manhwa. Seeing how clean and peaceful it looks, it's hard to believe a war was fought there just 10 years ago. Reconstruction is still ongoing in the outer regions. The humans may have won the war, but they failed to completely take the capital. Tugging on his sleeve, Lady Renee innocently pointed to a street food stall, eager to try something. The meat glistened in the heat, cooked to perfection. A skewer of venison seasoned with vegetables. Curious if it tasted like chicken, Adele ordered two, one for him and one for her. The moment they took their first bite, the pleasant taste lifted their spirits. Adele was amused to see the serious Renee make such an adorable expression. Maybe she's starting to open up to him little by little. They both continued strolling through the central square, chatting cheerfully. It had been a long time since Adele had a real break. A rare slice-of-life moment in this action-packed manhwa. Eventually, their walk led them to an imposing statue in the center of the capital. Adele stared at the enormous figure in confusion, and Renee had to explain that it depicted the first Demon King. Upon closer inspection, he noticed an unsettling resemblance to Diana. It's not every day one gets to see the features of the first Demon King in such detail, a scene straight out of a classic manhwa. When Adele tried to focus a little more, he saw the statue's eyes glow with a familiar light. The necklace hanging from his neck resonated with that piercing gaze. The solemn monument to the first Demon King shot an otherworldly energy directly into his artifact. To his surprise, this caused one of the gems to lose its luster and turn gray. The strangest part was that Renee didn't see what had just happened. She only noticed Adele acting strangely and taking out his artifact. Normally, it would be impossible for someone to miss such a blinding light. But from Renee's confused expression, she truly had no idea what just occurred. He remembered a page that asked him to offer a god in exchange for information, and now he had just discovered something significant in the most unexpected place. He's sure his artifact is somehow connected to the first Demon King, a common trope in a fantasy manhwa, which motivated him even more to investigate. With that, their city walk came to an end, with Adele brimming with curiosity, eager to uncover the next chapter of this manhwa. The next morning, they headed straight to Saitan for the entrance ceremony. The director and instructors were on stage in front of about 100 new students gathered in the auditorium. Adele could hear the rookies calling the director a little girl, a classic manhwa misjudgment, even though she could crush them without lifting a finger. Some even found her adorable. They were calling a girl covered in tattoos cute. Some of Adele's peers should probably have the contents of their hard drives checked. Suddenly, the director shot a death glare toward the rowdy students, a look that any manhwa reader would recognize. Adele made a mental note. He might be able to read minds with Instructor Aries' shout. Everyone fell silent and the ceremony began. The principal's opening speech was pretty standard, and the atmosphere calmed down. With that out of the way, the oath-taking of the top and second-place cadets began. As expected, the honors went to Diana and Baltan. Adele glanced at Lady Renee, who didn't seem affected by not getting one of the top spots. It makes sense, considering her only reason for enrolling in the academy is to get revenge on her mother. She isn't interested in competing. As for Adele, he has his own agenda regardless of what others say. On the way to the stage, Baltan shot Adele a challenging look and an arrogant smirk. Adele chose to ignore him. Getting tangled up with that lunatic can only bring trouble. When the top cadet took the stage, her mere presence made it clear why she was at the top. A classic power move in any manhwa. As expected of someone blessed by the gods, the daughter of the Demon King, Diana, is simply unmatched. The top cadet's oath to erase her disgrace and rebuild the Demon Kingdom resonated throughout the auditorium. Everyone could feel the rage of those who lost their homes and families at the hands of humans. If these demons find out that Adele belongs to the Arsen lineage, the worst-case scenario would be an eternity of torture. Once the ceremony concluded, Instructor Aries instructed everyone to check their assigned classes on the bulletin board. The students lined up neatly to look for their names. Upon checking the list, Adele found his name under Class A. When he looked for Lady Renee's name, a tear almost escaped his eye. Luckily, his boss was assigned to Class C. He tried to look annoyed, but the smile on his face betrayed his relief. She reminded him that he's still her bodyguard and must drop whatever he's doing when she needs him. Satisfied with the small newfound freedom, Adele headed to his assigned classroom. On the way, he accidentally bumped into another student. The boy turned to him with murderous eyes, veins popping on his neck. With a rude attitude, he threatened to kill him and called him despicable. Adele was perplexed by such sudden hostility from a stranger, a common trope in an action manhwa, and from a stranger. He recognized the boy. It was the son of Barris, a descendant of the sin of gluttony, Samuel, quite strong even among the 7 deadly sins, even though it was his fault. This manhwa is full of overpowered characters. The boy wanted to pick a fight. Trying to avoid trouble on the first day, Adele apologized. Samuel is an unbearable guy with an extremely punchable face. Aside from Lady Renee, it seems the children of the 7 deadly sins are all weirdos. Adele can only pray he doesn't end up in Class A with Baltan, a classic setup for a manhwa. In the Saitan teacher's lounge, a heated meeting was taking place. Instructor Idea was protesting that she should be respected as a proper Saitan instructor. Instructor Aries argued that she simply couldn't be trusted to handle a particularly dangerous child and claimed he had more experience handling these types of cases. Idea found it absurd that this man was trying to step on her to take control of Class A, a classic power struggle in this type of manhwa. Mediating between the two, Director Lucian asked them to be quiet. Idea found it unfair that she was always the one receiving criticism. To clear things up, the director let Aries explain his reason for wanting to switch classes with Idea. He simply explained that he was better prepared to handle that cadet Adele, as he had faced countless enemies like that boy on the battlefield. A single glance was all it took to see that the boy was a natural killer, the type of person who would point his sword at his own allies and needed to be contained immediately. The other instructors thought he was exaggerating about a half-demon boy who was considerably weaker than the children of the 7 deadly sins. Aries argued that raw power doesn't define true strength, a common theme in many a manhwa. Adele's audacity and composure are no less than the best of the heirs, which is why he wanted to take over Class A to keep a close eye on the cadet. So in the end, he was simply saying that Instructor Idea couldn't be trusted to handle an outstanding cadet. Hearing this useless chatter, the director sighed and released a bit of her aura, forcing the instructors to shut up. Although she understood Aries' concerns, changing class advisors now would do more harm than good. However, she also acknowledged that being a little cautious wouldn't hurt, so she simply tasked Instructor Idea with paying special attention to the boy Adele. With that, the meeting concluded and the first day of classes finally began. Inside the Class A classroom, Adele sat in silence while cursing his luck. In front of him was Laura Fraun, the heiress of lust, who was already back to harassing him. At least being stuck with her would be better than being stuck with Diana and, instead of Baltan, another of his classmates was Samuel, the moody brat of gluttony. The character archetypes in this manhwa are quite distinct. Laura, looking smug, asked him if he had followed her to the class, when everyone knew that class assignments were random. With a shameless laugh, she bestowed upon Adele the privilege of being her slave once again. Look at those horns. While they were having a one-sided conversation, Samuel intervened and threatened to kill them both if they didn't shut up. Even for a demon in this manhwa, this kid is unbearable. Laura didn't like his tone at all, but thankfully he found another target to bother, leaving Adele alone to lament that this would be her life for the foreseeable future. The door burst open and Instructor Idea entered the classroom, silencing everyone. Her presence, like something out of a military manhwa, commanded respect. When she finally reached the podium, Instructor Idea introduced herself to the cadets of Class A. She also added that people more commonly know her as the Calamity Legion. That nickname sounds intense, not gonna lie. The students murmured among themselves upon hearing her nickname. It was said she had single-handedly killed 10 to 30,000 humans at the Palak River. Adele liked what she heard. With such a strong mentor, her chances of survival in this brutal manhwa should greatly improve. After the introductions, she continued to explain how their classes would proceed in the coming days. In reality, it is quite simple. She would be in charge of teaching them hunting methods. Of course, they will not be hunting animals or demonic beasts, but rather one of the main reasons why cadets come to Satan. They will learn to hunt humans, a shocking plot twist straight out of a manhwa. Adele kept her face impassive upon hearing this from the instructor. Idea will be solely responsible for the house classes, while magic and weaponry will be taught by other qualified instructors. In addition to that, she will also handle basic endurance training. For their first class, being cooped up in a classroom won't be enough. They need to go to the training field. As soon as Adele laid eyes on the field, he was shocked by its size. It's probably 4 or 5 times larger than a typical field. With everyone gathered, Instructor Idea activated her ability and summoned a rotating black hole, directing everyone to pay attention to her actions. When the black hole reached critical mass, an expanse of darkness descended. The hole transformed into a portal, and the sound of marching metal echoed. An army of human crusaders emerged from the portal with blank expressions. Seeing the tense faces of her cadets, she assured them they were just illusions created by magic. She also created the Sword Saint, who had tested their mettle in the entrance exam. Adele could tell that someone capable of creating a clone that approached 1/10 the power of the Sword Saint was not someone to be trifled with. This instructor is a monster in her own right, like a final boss in a manhwa. While Saitan is quite formidable, he's pretty sure the Royal Academy surpasses him by a considerable margin. Instructor Idea gave the Class A cadets a simple task. They must get past the humans and reach her to begin. She scanned the field until her eyes landed on a particular cadet. She called out to Adele to be the first to try, and with a sly smile, she challenged him to stab her in the throat, just as he did to the Sword Saint's clone, right when he thought he would escape the instructor's prying eyes. Wow, it seems Instructor Idea is also wary of him. He first asked if they wouldn't have a normal, direct fight. She explained that humans use their leader as a source of mental fortitude. They are susceptible to falling like dominoes when the leader falls. A strong leader begets a strong army, a theme often explored in military manhwa, and she will take that role for this combat. Adele thought it made sense. Sun Tzu's Art of War had captured the concept that an enemy can be defeated by capturing their leader. As he drew his dagger, a confident smile appeared on his face. Subduing a leader in the middle of an army is too easy. Instructor Idea cheerfully added that subduing her is impossible, so a simple touch of a hand or a weapon strike on her body will be enough to pass. And so, she ordered her human army to begin the assault, a scene straight from an action manhwa. Barely a second had passed, and Adele had already transferred his position to behind the confident instructor. His dagger could take her head if he wanted. The confident smile vanished from her face, as a heavy killing intent froze her in place. Adele playfully asked if that was enough to pass. They had started a dozen meters apart, but for him that distance was nothing now. Now he only had to transfer his position twice to surprise her. He was constantly advancing. The limit of his position transfer will soon make him the perfect assassin, the kind you'd read about in a top-tier manhwa, capable of taking down any enemy base with ease and prowess. Instructor Idea laughed. She's not so naive as to leave her body unprotected. Her body is protected by a barrier. At least now he understands why. Ares is so determined to keep an eye on this boy. She gave him a passing grade and told him to return to his place. As he walked back to the line, he wondered if what he had felt was hostility or curiosity. Either way, he was worried that his identity would be leaked. Instructor Idea chose Adele and warned the rest of the class that those who failed would receive extra lessons, and so the cadets of the class took turns to try and get through an army of human clones. As expected of demons in this kind of manhwa, they had already mastered the basics of combat. It also helped that they were fighting the equivalent of normal humans with no powers. Still, all anyone had managed so far was to take down a few puppets that the instructor wasn't even directly controlling. One by one, the cadets were forced to surrender after being overwhelmed by a poorly assembled battalion formation. The next cadet who was called saw his peers' mistakes and tried to use elevation to get around the wall of human puppets. He was quickly shot down by a group of puppet archers and their arrows. Adele smirked awkwardly at such pathetic displays. Moments like this reminded him how broken position transfer really is in a manhwa. At this rate, he should be able to aim for the top spot in the class. Next on the list was none other than Samuel. Adele is eager to see if this brat's arrogant attitude matches his skill level. Taking his starting position, Samuel began to accumulate mana around his body. The amount of concentrated mana kept growing until the pressure in the area increased. At the height of his impudence, Samuel's mana became a swirling vortex with pure destructive power. The other cadets were almost swept away by the scorching wind. Adele watched in amazement as Samuel annihilated the entire human battalion in a single blow, a spectacle worthy of a manhwa. This was the first time he had seen magic at such a high level. Samuel's unique and gluttonous ability is a monstrous power that can devour everything in its path. Adele thought the boy might take first place in the class for now, but when the dust settled, Instructor Idea appeared unscathed. In fact, she was quite disappointed with this group. Adele had expected as much. There's no way an instructor would let a cadet take her down. Samuel's attack swept the board, leaving the leader untouched. It was an impressive feat that caused a slight surprise for a brief second. A true manhwa moment. Unfortunately for him, he failed like many others. Samuel was shocked, apparently wanting to appeal the decision, but Instructor Idea simply snapped her fingers and demonstrated why something so elementary was not useful against her. Behind her was an entire army of human puppets. Once again, she stressed that if a leader is left alive, humans will always find replacements to fill their ranks. Estimating there must have been about 200 puppets behind the instructor, Adele couldn't help but think that Samuel's magic was impressive, but only for a rookie cadet. The irritating Samuel knew better than to talk back, so he scoffed and returned to the group. Adele was surprised the boy could accept such a harsh result, albeit filled with discontent. When their gazes met for a second, Samuel felt his anger rising. The boy's overconfidence in his ability was the root of his failure, a common lesson in this manhwa. If he had focused all that power on the real target, he would have been able to pass the test without any problems. The initial evaluation continued as Idea called another cadet. An arrogant laugh echoed through the crowd from Laurel Brown. She stepped up, excited for her turn in the spotlight. The other cadets were sure she would pass. The only question was how she would perform against the puppets, calling them servants who dared to block her path. Her arrogant words didn't provoke the response she expected, sweating nervously as her haughty words trailed off. Realizing she couldn't use her abilities on the puppets, she desperately tried to think of a way out of this mess. As Adele expected, Laurel wasn't the type to fight directly in the entrance exam. She used her companions like mindless servants while she stayed back, giving orders like a queen bee. It's a classic trope in this kind of manhwa. She's practically harmless without minions. Desperate for a solution, she turned her attention to the group of cadets and made eye contact with Adele. With pleading eyes, she asked for his help, but still referred to him as a slave, unaware of their one-sided dynamic. The entire class quietly discussed what they had just heard. Adele wasn't going to help Laurel in the first place, but now he definitely wouldn't. Tired of her crying, Instructor Idea ordered her army to advance. Laurel backed away as she saw the puppets surround her and start pummeling her with fists and kicks. Adele couldn't believe she didn't even bother to learn how to cast buffs on herself in a world as harsh as this manhwa's. Everyone watched as the puppets beat her for a disturbingly long time, while she begged for help. While everyone was focused on the beatdown, Adele's attention, and the manhwa's focus, drifted. He had just seen one of his classmates heal a wound. Healing magic is a power that only humans can use. Given this, it was safe to assume the pink-haired girl must also be a half-demon. The talent for healing is rare, and a demon who can heal is a practically non-existent concept in the world of this manhwa. Although he didn't remember the girl's name, he made a mental note to find a way to connect with her somehow. Just as he was about to approach her, Instructor Idea asked him to help Cadet Fran back to the classroom now that the test was over. His timing couldn't have been worse. He'd rather try to befriend the healer than babysit a spoiled brat. He crouched down and flicked the battered and bruised Laurel on the forehead, calling her useless. Adele poked her repeatedly to wake her up and get her to stand. She could endure the punishment, but being humiliated in front of everyone made her feel worse. At least when she called him a slave, he could retort that she was pathetically weaker than one. Before the class ended, Instructor Idea ordered everyone to gather and line up. She had high expectations, but the results were disappointing, to say the least. Still, for this manhwa, today was a good first lesson. It is important for these youngsters to experience an overwhelming defeat so they can understand their place in the world. It's imperative that they see where their flaws are and what mistakes they make. Discovering their limits early is a huge step forward. Knowing this allows them to support each other in battle. Adele found it strange that Saitan used random class assignments when human imperial schools usually separate students based on their abilities, a departure from the typical academy manhwa. Instructor Idea touched on the concept of synergy. Despite all the failures today, one student passed the test. Standing out from the crowd, Idea gave him a lasting look, saying he would pay attention to his progress. Adele awkwardly thanked him, feeling the gazes of his classmates burning into his back. They were dismissed and directed to return to the classroom for their next class. If the instructors are hostile, so are his classmates. Samuel in particular looked ready to pounce on him. Adele is worried that at this point, forming his own faction might be nearly impossible with all the interference from those annoying guys from the 7 deadly sins. After homeroom, the rest of the lessons went by smoothly. The next class on his schedule was theoretical education. In the theory class, they learned about the history of the demon kingdom and the general weaknesses of humans. Adele listened attentively. Today, he learned that demons have a body structure practically identical to that of humans, and that striking certain body parts equates to the same level of pain. Next time, they will have an exam, so the instructor reminded them to study. It was surprisingly normal. However, Adele found going through school tedious, as he had already experienced it in his past life, a common theme in this type of manhwa. It's only the first day, but he already feels defeated. Just like in his previous life, he has no friends to talk to after class. Speaking of friends, there's a girl he's been trying to connect with, the pink-haired lady who has healing powers. Since the next class won't start for a few minutes, maybe this is his chance to talk to her. Walking slowly towards her desk, the two exchanged a look. With a warm smile, Adele properly introduced himself. The girl looked at him in silence, while the rest of the class stopped what they were doing and paid attention to the two of them. Now that he thinks about it, Adele realizes that when two powerful demons do something together, they inevitably draw the masses' attention, just like in a dramatic manhwa scene. The girl was visibly uncomfortable with this, so it would be best to leave the rest of the conversation for next time. He quickly removed himself from the awkward situation and headed for the door. He just wanted to go to the bathroom and feed his loneliness with his mana, or something like that. Suddenly, the door opened and Samuel came in for the umpteenth time today. The two stared at each other. Adele just wanted to get out, but this irritating brat looked at him as if he were lower than trash, a classic bully you'd find in any school-life manhwa. Adele reluctantly gave in and let him pass first. As the boy walked by, Samuel sneered and muttered something about how he was a nauseating, low-class creature. Everyone has a limit. Adele did his best to stay out of trouble all day, but he finally reached his breaking point. He turned his head and sarcastically praised Samuel's family, apparently hitting a sore spot. Samuel unleashed his pestilent aura and asked him to repeat what he had just said, reinforcing his challenge. Adele praised the Gluttony family for producing absolute trash that can walk and talk. Those words pushed Samuel over the edge. Although to be fair, it doesn't take much to provoke him and unleash his uncontrolled fury, a character flaw often highlighted in a good manhwa. Unlike Bolton, who knows when to push and when to hold back. This fool can't control his pure hatred and hostility. If this kid is going to get in the way of Adele's plans, then it would be best to take him out of the equation right now, a thought befitting a true manhwa protagonist. He thinks he should be able to get away with ripping off an arm if he frames the incident correctly. But before the two could clash, the instructor for the next class had already arrived without anyone noticing. After dispelling their furious auras, the instructor with glasses and slicked-back hair smiled kindly and politely. He asked everyone to take a seat. Neither Samuel nor Adele even sensed the instructor enter the room, a classic power display in this monster manhwa.